Let us understand about an experiment conducted in 1862 by a great French chemist called Louis Pasteur. He tested the validity of a widely accepted theory those days called spontaneous generation. So before understanding the experiment conducted by Louis Pasteur, let us understand the background of spontaneous generation. So, if you see the background of spontaneous generation, in those days, early natural philosophers like Aristotle also, in explaining how this life came on this earth, they gave a very crude theory called theory of spontaneous generation. This theory was not based on any experimental validations, but it was purely based on the observations. Like, for example, if a dead body is left like that only for few days, some creeping organisms which are emerging out of the dead body, we call it as maggots now. So they thought that a dead body, a non-living matter, is giving rise to a living matter, that is maggots, spontaneously. So they stated that life originates from a non-living matter. This statement of theory of spontaneous generation was challenged by Louis Pasteur experimentally. So he did so many sequential experiments. So based on the critics, he did so many experiments to disprove theory of spontaneous generation. Let us understand about experiments in that the first experiment he conducted. In this experiment, he took one conical flask. In that, he took nutrient broth also. What is this nutrient broth? Nutrient broth is nothing but a solution wherein all the nutrients are there which are required for the growth of microorganisms. So he took the flask. As you can see in the picture, the flask was open and it was exposed to the atmospheric air. That means whatever the microbes which are there in the atmospheric air can reach to the nutrient broth. He left this nutrient broth for a while. After this, he observed that there was a cloudy appearance in the nutrient broth. As a microbiology will state this, a cloudy appearance tells us that there is a microbial growth. That means whatever the microbes which are there in the air has grown there. So same explanation given by Louis Pasteur also. He explained that yes, whatever the microbes which are present in the air, it is landing on the broth, and that became the starter culture, and that is the reason there is a microbial growth. But others didn't accept this theory. They told that no, whatever the sterilized broth you have taken, that itself is a non-living matter, and that itself had whatever the energy which is required for the growth of life. So it spontaneously gave rise to the life. So Louis Pasteur thought for a while. He understood that okay, you are telling broth itself is having life. It is not because of the air. So we'll do one thing. This time, let us do experiment number 2 like this. We will close one flask and will block the air so that the air will not reach the broth. So what he did, he blocked the air so that the air is not reaching the broth. And this time, as we all know, control flask which was open, which was exposed to the air only, shown the life, and the blocked air and the blocked flask or the closed flask didn't show any kind of microbial growth. This was again proved that air is responsible. The direct contact with the air is responsible for the growth. Again, the explanation given by Louis Pasteur was same, that the vital force is nothing but the air which was carrying so many microbes, and these microbes, the airborne microbes, are responsible for microbial growth. Fine. You are blocking, the others has, what to say, they have like criticized this, like okay, you are blocking the flask, fine. You are blocking the microbes visit also, fine. Although you are blocking microbial visit, along with that you are blocking the energy, you are blocking the force which is responsible for the life. That means you have stopped the entry of life force also. Fine. So blocking is an issue here. So Louis Pasteur thought again, and he this time, okay, I'll allow the life force, whatever the life force you are telling, no, that I'll allow. But this time, I'll not allow the air. I'll not allow the air directly, but before entering into the broth, I will sterilize the air so that whatever the microbes which are present in the air will not reach the broth. He did the same, as you can see in the picture. The experiment he conducted and the observation he got, as we expected, whatever the organisms are there, they were seen in the open flask only, and the flask which was not having sterilized air, but it was exposed to the natural air. This time, the Louis Pasteur has concluded the same thing, that life comes from air And here, as I'm killing the organisms before it is passing, air is not responsible. Microbes which are present in the air is responsible. Fine, you have like kept the burner and you are using the burner to kill whatever the living organisms present in the air. In this case, you have killed the life force also, right? Others has exclaimed this, like others criticized this. You are killing the life processes also, life force also you are killing. Okay, fine. I'm killing the life process by burning the air. Fine, I'll not burn now. So what I'll do, I'll allow your air, I'll allow your life force also. But this time I'll not allow the life process force, whatever the force you are thinking, I'll not allow it directly. But this time, let us make one flask in which direct exposure will not be there, but exposure will be there. So he took a flask, which you can see in the screen, that is a flask which is having a neck which is just like a swan neck. Here, he kept this kind of flask for a while, but he didn't observe any kind of microbial growth. He observed that until the flask was broken, until the swan neck was broken, there was no microbial growth. That means whatever the flask is there, that flask itself, the swan neck itself is acting like a filter which is trapping all the dust particles, all the microbes there itself, and not allowing any microorganisms to reach the broth. Fine. Here the air is going into the broth. Whatever the vital force also is going into the broth. But the broth is not showing any kind of the growth of microorganisms, as you can see in the picture. Again, Louis Pasteur explained the same way, that you can see here, although I am allowing the life force to enter, but life is not generating. Other had an explanation too. What is that? They are telling, you have given a very short period of time, and in this short period of time, how you can expect a vital life force can enter into the flask? Give some time. Fine, I'll give time. So Louis Pasteur kept the flask for many days, many months, many years also. But although we have not seen any kind of growth, after a moment also, he checked that there was no such growth of microorganisms in the broth. So others told that Louis Pasteur, yes, you are right. So this came to a conclusion of Louis Pasteur. He succeeded in his conclusion, where you can see all the pictures, all the results coming in experiment number 1, 2, 3, 4. In experiment number 1, he was directly exposing the atmospheric air into the broth. The organisms were growing. In experiment number 2 also, whatever the flask which was not sealed, there only it was growing. And in experiment number 3, where unsterilized air, the natural air growing, there only it was growing. And in experiment number 4, whatever the air which was directly exposed, when the broken swan neck, there only it is growing. So he came to a conclusion where life is required for the growth of new life. This came to a conclusion that life always comes from pre-existing living organisms. Thank you.